Fear Not, Episode 47. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Dr. Tara Fields. Welcome, Tara. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you, Billy?
I'm doing quite well myself. Thank you. Tara Fields is a licensed psychotherapist based in Marin County, California. She is the best-selling author of The Love Fix: Repair and Restore Your Relationship Right Now. In addition, she is a media consultant, certified psychodrama therapist, and a nationally recognized relationship expert. Working with individuals, couples, and families, she integrates family systems, mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, and attachment theory in her clinical practice. She's also written blogs for PsychCentral.com and theHuffingtonPost.com. She's also frequently featured and quoted in numerous publications such as Redbook, Glamour, and Brides. Tara's also been an expert guest on numerous network shows including Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, and CNN. Tara, could you maybe fill in the gaps and also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Yes, I live in Marin County, which is right outside of San Francisco. And since we're talking about facing fears, when I was in my early 30s, I went through a divorce. I had gotten married young, and I went to graduate school in LA, and I'd been there. And I just thought, life is too short to stay stuck where you don't want to be. And right now, I'm letting go of a lot of attachments. And I was dating somebody up here in the Bay Area. And for your listeners that haven't been here, to me, it's the most beautiful place in the world. I really, to feed my own soul, I need to be connected to nature, to be around like-minded people. I love to hike, very involved in the environment. And I absolutely fell in love with Marin County, and I had a lot of support from friends in L.A. And without knowing anybody up here, having a single client, and having a thriving practice in L.A., I just up and moved here. And I've been here for probably 20 years, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful lifestyle. And maybe even 20 years ago, I met my now husband, and that's my life here. Started my practice, which I've always maintained, even when I've hosted TV shows and done other things. And as we're speaking, my latest rescue has just come in saying, "Aha, you're on the phone." Now I know. Now I can manipulate you to feed me so I don't start barking.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Tara, since you are sort of a relationship expert, I thought that maybe you could address and help us with the fear of intimacy and help us to maybe understand that and get beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question, and I think it really speaks to the heart of many of the reasons why so many people struggle with not only finding an intimate relationship and a lifelong connection, if that's what they want, but also maintaining it. Because if you ask most people, especially when they're not in a relationship or in one that's fraught with conflict, they'll say, "I really want intimacy. I want to feel like somebody really gets me, like they're my best friend." But somehow, even with that intention, intimacy becomes a great challenge. And one thing that I spent a lot of time focusing on in The Love Fix was when conflict arises, when fears come up, even when you're dating, it's so important to really reframe that and say, what's the opportunity here? Because there's a line in the Course in Miracles, if your listeners are familiar with it, and it says, love brings up anything unlike itself and to be healed. And I think for many people, we sort of stumble with and to be healed. So we get triggered, our fears of being vulnerable come up, and then we either sabotage or we run for the hills. So, we could spend the whole interview just talking about being vulnerable. And since I tend to reframe things and look at the positive, the first step is always the hardest step when you're challenged, when you're being challenged. So if you can just say, wow, let me take a breath here, let me be mindful, I'm scared to being vulnerable. I finally have found a partner who's present, who accepts me for who I am, and I'm really afraid. And the second piece is also you do have to have emotional courage, and I differentiate a lot between physical courage, emotional courage, to say, okay, if an intimate relationship means being loved by my authentic self, I'm going to much courage to reveal myself, to be who I am, which means being vulnerable. And if they say, no, sorry, or they run for the hills, it's like, thank you. I'm glad I eliminated them now. But for most people, we're so afraid of that, so we hide our authentic self. Maybe we even end up getting married, and then all of a sudden, all the issues come up. So, really the whole key is, if we're going to, as we say in the news business, and people always wanting the quick fix, are you willing to be vulnerable, and are you willing to take a stand for yourself and for having a healthy relationship by saying, I am willing to reveal my authentic self, and if I'm not accepted for that, then, hey, that's great. I get to sift out this person, take a look at myself now before I, and many people do this, actually walk down the aisle.
Since that's so much easier said than done, what could we do to at least initiate that process?
Well, I think everything starts with intention. So let's say you're single and you're just getting into the dating world. You really have to first start being mindful about what is a healthy relationship to me. Is it just, I'll never be alone again, or somebody's going to guarantee my happiness? Well, that's not realistic, and that's going to end in disappointment. But if you say that I want a partner, I want a friend, I want somebody who has shared values, I want someone to be to be connected to me in a way where we can continue to grow together and even to heal ourselves. And when I say that, I sort of hesitate. So it's not as if they're going to fix me, but I'm willing to use what arises in the relationship. Because when we really fall in love and it's the right person, and maybe somebody is standing there for the first time and saying, I'm not going anywhere, I love you, all our old fears come up. So I'm willing to say, I will use what arises when I get triggered, which we all do. I still, years later, after being married for almost 2 decades, and being a relationship therapist, I still have triggers that come up, but I have this commitment to say, does this feel familiar? Where does this come from? Before I do something to sabotage the relationship or play the blame game.
It's a little spooky that you're talking about this because I'm kind of going through that right now. So
I know it's so funny, and I'm such a big believer in synchronicity, and I just want to say to your listeners, we spoke for about 3 minutes. I don't know you. I was so drawn to when you invited me to the name of your your podcast, and so now you say that to me. First of all, I want to say how wonderful that you're willing to be authentic in that way, and thank you for reaffirming my belief in synchronicity and that there are no accidents.
Yeah,
and I'm actually feeling really touched right now.
Cool. Yeah, I don't believe in accidents either, so I'm right on that page with you. So Because clear, I'm personally at this sort of stage where I've met someone. We almost have a year under the belt. This is the longest anyone's stuck around, and
Aw.
it has brought up some triggers. So, and I'm conscious of it, and I'm sure other people are too. I guess maybe you could help us to understand what we're supposed to do with that.
Well, you've taken the first step and the hardest step, which is I'm aware that I'm being triggered. And again, in the Love Fix, and I know we're going to give away a copy, and let me make sure that I get you a copy as well. It's such a big piece of what I write about, which is if you can take ownership and say, these are my wounds. These are my wounds to be triggered, and here is an opportunity to repair them. And if we're lucky enough to be with a partner who we feel safe enough to reveal our triggers to and go, oh my gosh, honey, I'm about to say, you're really awful. Why are you doing that? But then I can say to myself, does this feel familiar? And familiar can be as far back as our childhood, and usually that's where our really profound wounds come from, or is it from the past relationship? I mean, a classic example is, and I use a lot of case studies with couples, and they're almost all composites, but they're composites of the most common conflicts and issues that couples have. So also, readers go, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm not chopped liver. Let's say a woman is in a really good marriage and her husband wants to go for a weekend bike ride, or he wants to go fishing, or he likes to have some me time. And all of a sudden she starts pulling on him and she's fearful. And instead of saying, I have this experience of my husband being really trustworthy, why am I getting so triggered? He might say, oh my gosh, the more she does that, the more I want to pull away. He might say, what's being triggered for me? And I have a couple in the book where he got in touch with, he had a very overly enmeshed mother who was always trying to live through him, breathe through him. She also had a couple of relationships, and I think one was her past husband where he cheated. So instead of trying to get their partner, to change their behavior, it's an opportunity to say, oh, I'm being triggered, and wait a minute, you're not that past relationship that caused me so much pain. Let's talk about it, and we can heal it instead of sabotaging it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so that's the opportunity. And again, I suffered through, I just have to say, I suffered writing this book, which should have been maybe, they said, 6 months. It was almost 2.5 years because I really wanted to offer authentic case studies and everything I'm talking about, so that couples, and especially people that don't have the luxury of going into couples therapy or even individual therapy, tools and 3-minute fixes and exercises where when this stuff comes up, you've got a way to process it. Because, God, I just had this thought how we're really plagued by loneliness. And I think a lot of, I've never said this in all the interviews I've done. I've never addressed loneliness, and it's just coming up now, that I think our fear of intimacy, our old wounds are really at the source of loneliness. And I'm not just talking about intimate relationships with romantic partners, but even establishing friendships as well.
It's fascinating that you say that. Just my own personal experience. I really cherish my quiet time. It's just sort of in my nature.
Me too.
Yeah, and I'm a pretty self-contained. I mean, I've worked really hard at it to be adjusted and can be by myself. But there are those moments, even with just friends. You're like, gosh, I wish I had like a really great friend right now.
That's right. As opposed to, there are people who I just don't want to be alone, and they're always booking activities and doing stuff, and it's, there's that slippery slope between I just want to fill up that space and I don't want to be alone, to having the emotional courage to say, wait a minute, I'm willing to be alone, and unless I'm really feeling an authentic connection and it feels good, I'm not just going to hang out with people. And I can really relate to that, Billy, because I just don't want mindless relationships. Yeah, I might have my one friend who, you're my movie buddy, but we also can really talk about those movies and it's authentic. But I've never been one to say, oh, I got to have something on the books all the time, whether I was single or married. And I also really cherish alone time. I really need that balance. And one of the 5 conflict loops that I talk about in the book is me versus we, where you do have to be able to become one with someone, with your partner, and be a we, but then you need to be able to pull back and just be me. I just need some me time. But I think it's interesting that you also, you and I need to just hang out together for a couple of hours one of these days, if you're ever in the Bay Area or in Chicago, because just that whole issue of loneliness, I think, is an interesting one to explore.
I agree. I would totally love the opportunity to come back to the Bay Area and revisit. So
we'll go hiking in the redwoods.
Oh, that's
Let's
even
do that,
perfect.
or Mount
Yeah.
Sam. Come on. Open invitation. I'll be your tour guide.
All right. Sounds good. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay.
So let's maybe talk about the other side of the spectrum, because I know there's a lot of turmoil going on right now. So what could you possibly give to the listener who might be in a loving relationship, but there might be some problems going on, maybe different points of view, that, it's not necessarily a bad relationship, but somehow they've broken down and they're arguing?
Yeah, well, the first step is to say, if I wasn't, and I talk about this in the book, I talk about anger. And from my experience, anger is usually a protection, and it's a way to, it serves one of 2 purposes. One is it's either a way to not feel pain. If you're angry, you can't feel vulnerable or pain. So you have to have, again, the emotional courage. And again, in the book, I talk a lot about the difference between emotional and physical courage and how we can maybe develop a little bit from the other person who has that opposite kind of courage. Or it's a way to manipulate somebody. What I'm experiencing, what I'm hearing in my private practice and when I take phone calls on the air, is that as a result of what's happened, this went on before the election and now, is that it has really taken the lid off a very big Pandora's box for a lot of people, and especially women. And it's interesting, there are couples that have absolutely broken up because one's voted for Trump and one's voted for Hillary. And, for many of them, there have been issues that have been held at bay in terms of values and, other issues. So it's really not about who they voted for. But what I'm really finding fascinating right now, and I think a lot of women will relate to this, is that I'm coming up with this new term called Trumpference, which is, for a lot of women, let's say they voted for Hillary and their mates voted for Hillary, if their husband is a male, is that we as women are very, very emotional, and a lot of issues are getting triggered, whether it's been sexism at work, physical abuse, sexual abuse in the workplace, out of the workplace. And really well-meaning guys, if will say, "Gosh, honey, that's really awful," or we'll be, as women, watching something on the news and hearing the latest appointment to some whoever it is in the current administration, and if a man isn't matching our feelings about it. And this is what I'm seeing, is that women are feeling really upset and really angry, and guys are being blindsided right now saying, "Honey, I'm with you, I understand." But men tend to be a little more left brain and pragmatic, And what I'm noticing, again, this is anecdotal, they're not being as triggered by what's going on in the world. Having said that, I can bring that back to what we were talking about earlier, which is everything that goes on, every trigger is an opportunity to heal. And what I want to say to men is, if that's going on, say, honey, I'm on your side. Remember, it's me. What's being triggered? And for women, it's very important for us to take a breath and go, wait a minute. Is this what I call Trumpference, where I'm transferring on my friend, my male friend, my husband, a lot of stuff that's being triggered by what's going on politically or even with statements that our president is making. Does that make sense? I know I keep saying that because I've got so much to say to you, Billy, and your listeners today.
And we welcome it, so bring it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time. And if we can reframe things and say, okay, when a Pandora's box, when the lid is taken off, and the lid is being taken off individually and collectively, I believe right now, it's an opportunity. Those demons are coming out to heal them.
So I'm getting the impression that there's a lot of personal responsibilities. So what can a person do if they are, particularly with the situation that you just brought up, what's the best way to handle someone that might be dealing with the trigger and they need the healing, and you're their partner, but it may be a little bit of a touchy situation?
Okay, and again, I talk about this in the book. You can say, honey, you're really angry, and I want to be there. Are you willing to explore what's underneath the anger? And it's important to take care of yourself. And I talk about this in the blame game and with couples where one is really angry and the other one's always sort of walking on eggshells. To be able to say, listen, it's really hard for me to be around you when you're just blaming me, when you're dumping your anger. When you really want to explore this and talk about this, I'm here for you. I want to be your partner. But I just can't be around the raging and the anger right now.
Tara, if someone would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I have a website, tarafields.com. And also for those of you in the Bay Area, or if you want to come and visit the Bay Area, on March 30th, I will be doing a Love Fix book event at the Barnes & Noble in Corte Madera, and we're going to have some delicious Love Fix cupcakes. And the last time I did a book event, it was really wonderful. It almost ended up being a relationship workshop. So if any of you listeners end up being there, please come and say hi. And you can always visit my website, tarafields.com. I'm doing social media, yay, for the first time. So you can visit Facebook and Twitter, and I just started doing Instagram, and I blog at Psych Central.
Tara, what advice would you like to leave with us today?
I think that I think there's a real people have been very depressed right before the election, right after the election. And I think one of the positive things that's going on for so many people right now that are feeling hopeless, and this is in general, whether we relate it to relationships or not, and this is, to the title of your spectacular podcast, which is people, and also to talk about loneliness and intimacy. There's a really fantastic opportunity right now, and it's happening, where people who have never been involved in community service or politics, or even a part of groups, are joining groups and really seeing how empowered they can be and how really beautiful it can be to connect to other like-minded people. It's also, if people are single, there's never been a better opportunity. Forget about, I know people use Tinder and online dating, and that's all really terrific. But if you really want to sift through and find somebody, a mate that is like-minded and where you have an authentic, intimate connection, go and volunteer right now. Find a cause, find a group that you really connect to in your community, and join up. And even if you don't meet somebody else, you're going to feel good about yourself. So I don't know, Billy, I'm kind of wrapping it all up. There's loneliness, there's finding a mate, there's really finding a way if you're feeling depressed and hopeless right now. I'm a real big believer, and I was brought up this way. I think it's part of my culture, my tribe, is to do something. And I just want to say, Billy, it's been such a pleasure not only to speak with you, but even to find out about your podcast. And I just think, again, it is so timely, facing your fears. Facing your fears, that's what it all gets down to.
Agreed, and thank you so much. And I want to let everyone also know, again, that Tara has generously donated a copy of her book, The Love Fix, and we'll be giving it away. So if you'd like the opportunity to win that, visit the giveaways page at livingbeyondyourfears.com to submit your free entry form today. And Tara, I really want to thank you. It really was, I think, serendipitous that we were talking today. I want to thank you so much for being generous with all your time and your knowledge. This has been really great.
Well, it's absolutely been my pleasure, and I wish love and happiness for everybody who's listening. Namaste to you all.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.